managing director of Paragon Trust Company and tax and private client practitioner, joins us to bring a common sense approach to money in a world of total insanity. Let's welcome Tony D'Angelo.
All right, Tony D joins us every Tuesday as we locked him in, gave him all kinds of cash to be part of the show. We appreciate that. Is cash still king, even though the stock market has crashed?
If you're asking me that question, and proud to be among all you guys, and good morning, Lee, it is always a good idea to have cash, some emergency fund, because it's the good times are never all that good, and the bad times are never all that bad. You know, it's Warren Buffett, and I've got very mixed emotions about Warren Buffett, but he's always said, you advance when the others are retreating, and you retreat when the others are advancing. Yes, it is always good to have some cash, because it's either going to be a small king or a capital letter king. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
You know, so I'm watching the stock market tumble yesterday, 3,000 points, which doesn't mean a lot personally because I don't have any stocks. I feel bad for the folks who do and folks who, stuck their money in a 401k. And let me just, in a simplistic way, the most simplistic way, essentially, I was trying to tell people this yesterday, and maybe I was wrong, so you can straighten me out if I was. I was wrong a lot yesterday, which is a regular occurrence. But if you, let's say, had what accumulated to be about $300,000 worth of 401k going into, let's say, 2 weeks ago when the stock market was closing in on 30. Now it's around 20. Essentially, have you lost $100,000? Is that the easiest way to explain it, or am I not even close?
Well, put it this way, and I hate to say you're more right than you might think. Yes and no. A 401k is really deferred income. So in other words, when you haven't presently lost a thing, what you're able to take out is less. However, what you're able to take out is subject to tax. So, yeah, you have lost something. One of the things that you should do is, and people try to pick the bottom and things like that, is look to see and, continually buy into your 401k, because things will go up, things will go down, and you'll be buying things at lower levels over the course of time. The important thing is to save and to have resources, not to play the market like a casino, because it just doesn't play that way. It's too uncontrollable.
Gotcha. I got you. But I mean, but technically, the worth, you probably lost, 30% of your net worth in the last 14 days, right? I mean, that seems like...
Yeah, and you want to know something? Markets have risk, and it's always a good idea to understand that and to know this can happen and to say, well, if this happens, where do I go? There's too many people out there that were thinking, yes, it's always going to be going up. It never works that way. It's never worked that way historically. Now, historically, on a broad base, yes, but you will have bumps in the road. You had 2001 when the markets were shut. You had 2008, and I have very, very mixed emotions about what happened there. You had the dot-com bust. I mean, but even so, it's come back. It's, slow and steady here is going to win the race. But yes, no, there's no doubt about that. You do take that hit, but yet you've got to say, well, how do I prepare for this if this happens?
Gotcha. Again, Tony D joins us. If you ever have a question for Tony, you could always feel free to pass it along my way, and I'll try to pass it along to him as we chat.
Sure, happy to help.
All right, so where'd you want to go today? Where'd you want to take us today?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Stafford Act and, what's coming out of Washington and what's coming out of the state of Connecticut. And on Friday, after what I thought was really a C week for the president, I mean, he, and this is as we talked and discussed off the air, it was a case of having A grades and F grades in some of his performances, but basically what the Stafford Act is, what a disaster declaration is, it is nothing more than, quote unquote, the government can turn the spigot to help the country and the states during the course of a disaster. You will go to mainstream media sites and they will say, this is the precursor for martial law. I mean, I don't know where they get these people to work in these stations, but it doesn't come to that whatsoever. The government is powerless to do that except in the case of state insurrection. Now, interestingly enough, people ask me, well, what about the tax deadline? I'm waiting for something to come out of Washington, which I believe is slow. I think the Trump communication machinery here is not really what it needs to be. But I'm waiting for something to come out of Washington to say, okay, we've got 60 days, 90 days. You guys won't have to come up with these horrible payments in 4 weeks after, and you're going to be paying them off of these reduced 2020 savings that you have, and you're paying 2019 numbers. But they need to be better here. I get very angry at our so-called press corps when they ask the president and the secretary of the Treasury these inane, inept, stupid questions when they're not asking things that real Americans need to know. But that's basically all it is. And then it comes down to, like the state of Connecticut, our poor people that own the bars and the restaurants and the casinos and the places where people really need to go, the churches, to get a little faith and reinsurance. Okay, that's all shut down. But it's like, and I had a long discussion with Kathy about this, and it's this whole thing of mitigation of risk. I get that. I understand that. But yet, 10,500 people in the United States last year died of drunken driving. I've been in discussions with the state of Connecticut for years and years and years about traffic safety. It's okay. I mean, I'm all for public safety, but, you have to put all this in perspective. So it's the kind of thing that I guess, what am I really saying here? It's we need a bright line. We need to understand people. It's going to get better. It's going to be fine. You just have to keep your head. Don't go kill somebody in the Walmart for a roll of toilet paper. Trying to get all that in 10 minutes. Lee.
No, listen. I understand. I told the audience yesterday. I happened to have to go to Walmart on a Friday night, and to describe the scene is nothing short of apocalyptic, like I'm watching Mad Max. And I honestly, there were. And I said this yesterday, I don't want to sound redundant to the listeners, but I mean, there were displays knocked over. There was food everywhere. There wasn't food, as far as bags of chips, but if you went to the meat counter or the meat aisle, there was nothing. People they took it like locusts, they weren't ever going to eat again. It was, I don't know. It's the human condition, but this is not one of those times where you should go, gobble up everything. Right?
And I think it's kind of how people have been the last 20 or 30 years, how they've been brought up. As my mother-in-law would always say, a lot of people aren't brought up, they're dragged up, and now we're starting to see it. And this is where I think where the White House really needs to do better. I was spending some time last night going back and looking at some of the addresses of Richard Nixon, and people say, I can't believe he's invoking Richard Nixon. Yeah, Nixon had a lot wrong with him. The one thing about Nixon is when there was a moment of national security and seriousness, he was clear, he looked at you, he read from the script, and he said, this is what we're going to do in very clear and measured tones. This is what we need right now. We're not getting it, and we need to, because otherwise again, I'm sort of a political agnostic, but man, oh man, I'd hate to think about if there was, somebody in the White House who couldn't cope nearly as good as this guy is, and he needs to cope better.
Would you have done anything different so far?
I've racked my brain about that time and time again. I would have probably waited to see, rather than say, okay, this is the way it's going to be, and we have to shut everything down. There, I think the national government had to have a brighter line, and Trump was really slow to get out there and do it. I do support the ban. I do support the fact that, you really can't have people around, but, the other thing is life is risk, and, if public people were kind of calmed down a little bit, you just wouldn't have all the madness. So, yeah, I would have approached it a little bit differently, even though I think it needs to end up in the same place for a time.
All right, one more, and then I'll let you go. And thanks, as always, Tony D. If we're out, or people are out of work for 2 months, businesses closed for 2 months, gyms are closed for 2 months, restaurants are shut down for 2 months, the casino already, minimum of 2 weeks. What happens to the economy?
Well, I think the results are predictable, which is why I would have tempered this a little bit. Kathy and I had a great discussion as I was writhing at 4 a.m. just after yesterday and today, and knowing that we would have this discussion about, quote unquote, what is the public good? And I would say, well, what is the aggregate public good? If you're going to keep everybody safe, but yet you're going to ruin the economy to the point of no comeback whatsoever, there is a concern. Right now, you do have to get money in the hands of these people. Government needs to do it just because of the shape we're in. But this is not the best solution. And the other thing is, when this all gets politicized 6 months from now, or whatever the case may be, this will be an excuse to raise taxes. Hey, we don't have enough money.
Yeah.
But and let me just say this: the fact of the matter is, I don't see governments reducing their workforce. There's not a whole lot more to do if you're keeping everybody at home. What's wrong with this picture, Lee?
That's a good point. I heard Mitt Romney throw out $1,000 for every citizen in the country.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
Why not 10? What's the debt? Give me 10,000. That could go a long way. Hey, listen, pal. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Listen, thanks so much.
All right, stay safe.
God bless everybody. Bye.
All right, Tony's partner in crime, Bob Lazari, will join us next. Talk about